Hey everyone, Dominator Axel here, and I'm here to try out an album review. I've never done this kind of video before, but I thought I would go ahead and give it a shot since we're trying tons of new things here on the YouTube channel because everything's crazy around here. Okay. This is the most unpredictable YouTube channel, I think, on the entire website. But I could be wrong. And we're reviewing one of my favorite records of the year of 2015, TesseracT's Polaris. It's their third full-length record, obviously sprinkled with 2 EPs as well. Goes along with their history, which is blah and doesn't make any sense. So Polaris is their third studio record, their third full-length. They've had 2 EPs as well. The first one being the Concealing Fate EP, that was their essential debut. And a second EP, Perspective, which had their second vocalist, Elliot Coleman. He was on that record and that EP only. Most of my album reviews are probably going to be positive. I'm probably not going to have very many albums that I kind of frown upon on the channel because, I don't know, I'm here for the positive vibes, man. I don't really like to show my negative opinions because I'm really, I'm not all that confident, so if I have a negative opinion, I kind of don't want to say it because, you know, we're all about good vibes on this channel, okay? That's how it's going to be. It's all about enjoying the music that you enjoy, right? Instead of the stuff you don't like, because who talks about stuff they don't like, except for complainers, you know? Are you a complainer? I surely hope not. Complaining's not good for you. If you want a good life, don't complain. TM. Trademark. TesseracT are a British progressive metal group, and they gained popularity around the late 2000s, early 2010 gent movement, is what people like to call it. Yes, the D is silent. Don't forget that. And I'm not a big fan of the gent movement. I'm not really a fan of metal genres in general, and just people trying to categorize everybody, because, I don't know, you're people in the end, and you make cool music. Isn't that what matters? So, anyways, but that's how they ended up becoming popular, along with Periphery and Fell Silent Monuments, all of those other bands that fall into that almost progressive metal with really polyrhythmic song structures. That's kind of a way to describe the gent movement. One thing that TesseracT is notorious for is having many different vocalists. They started out with Dan Tompkins in their first album, One, and he then departed the band to work on other projects, and Elliot Coleman joined in for the Perspective EP, which was their second EP following the One album. And they thought things were going to work out with him, but he parted ways with the band as well, and Ash O'Hara joined not long after that to make their album Altered State, which is a concept album. So was One in some sort of way. There was a 5-song part on the album that was a concept piece almost, but then the rest seemed to be other songs sprinkled there throughout. But Altered State had 4 movements of around 3 songs each. After Ash and the Altered State movement, he then left to work on his solo project, which I believe is like a pop outing almost. I've heard his songs on SoundCloud, and they're actually really good. So if you ever do want to check that out, you can find him on SoundCloud. He's got some pretty good songs there as well. Then Dan ended up coming back into the band after being in Sky Harbor for a bit. Sky Harbor is another progressive metal outfit. Check them out too. They make some pretty darn good stuff. So yeah, Dan's back in the band. And that's been all the rage for the past few months because there's been a lot of controversy as to which vocalist is better and all that other stuff. And I think all 3 of them are actually really good in their own right. So it's good to see Dan come back. Honestly, I was okay with all 3 of their vocalists. Pretty much everything that they've made since the beginning has been unique and engaging and a load of fun to listen to. So, Polaris, all in all, I would say that it's not a concept album like Altered State. It has, each song is different and covers a different topic, but I would say that they do follow an outlying theme of not necessarily dystopian, but feeling like you don't fit in your environment and trying to break free of that. Each song has a different theme, different lyrics. There aren't any intertwining riffs necessarily that kind of blend the album together, but there are ambient transitions in between each track to kind of give it a more cohesive feel, and there are some lyrical themes, in my opinion, that are kind of shared among the different songs on the record. So at least you have that. It does sound like one uniform album, and that's one thing I really do appreciate about it. It doesn't sound like there's just a bunch of random riffs thrown together and, oh, there's your song, or, there's your entire album, There's only 9 tracks on this album. It runs around 45 to 50 minutes, from what I remember. So not terribly long. I believe Altered State was longer, somewhere in the 60-minute range, and so was their first album. So this one's a little shorter. There are some more digestible songs on this record. This album, in my opinion, has a really good choice of opening and closing tracks to surround the album. So it really does sound like a complete work once you've both started and finished the album. It's one of those albums that you can kind of listen to and you feel like once you hit the end, you could go right back to the beginning and it would flow pretty seamlessly. So that is one thing I really do enjoy about the album, is its cohesiveness. It feels like each of the songs have some kind of connection, but less of a connection than Altered State did. Polaris has more of the, okay, here's one set song, here's another song with totally different riffs and themes in it, and then we've got the next one. Like, none of the songs feel like they are similar in any way, but at the same time, because of the good opening and closing tracks, it seems to hold everything else together. And I feel like with Altered State and Polaris, I'll flip-flop depending on how I'm feeling. The 2 singles that they did release from this album are Messenger and Survival. And I do kind of agree with them on the fact that those 2 should be the singles, as they're both relatively short and follow almost that verse-chorus-verse structure. Messenger less so than Survival. Messenger's more of a progressively styled track, and both of them I honestly do like quite a bit. Survival does have the, what I'd like to call the single slump, as to it's a amazing track the first time you listen to it, and then it kind of fades off over time. Not necessarily a bad thing, as Survival is obviously still a really fun track to listen to, but it's not something I can really get into. TesseracT is one of those bands that I like to pick apart each layer in the song each time I listen to it. Their albums are typically growers for me, meaning it does take several listens for me to understand and enjoy them fully. But the good thing with bands that are growers is that you can listen to their albums multiple times and you don't really ever get bored of them. You're always paying attention to something new every time because the layering is very vast. You feel like you can kind of just put all your attention into it, and it always gives back every time. The production of this record is, of course, done by Ackle at 4D Studios, which I believe is in Britain, because that's where they're based out of. All of their records were produced at 4D Studios as well, and as usual, their sound is extremely polished. Let's get started with the track by track. The track by track, because we like to go through each track on its own, just so I can kind of give you an idea as to what each song sounds like. Obviously, you guys can go preview this. It's out on YouTube. I believe the entire album stream is available for everyone to see. So definitely go check that out if you want to hear what each song I'm describing is kind of like. And let me know if I described it well enough. I'm always kind of curious as to what you guys think about my style. You guys can cramp my style if you want. So the album starts off with the track Utopia. It's an instantly likable track for me. I like the fact that it kind of almost has that single quality, but I feel like it's too dark for them to have released as a single. I like Dystopia because it's very catchy. It's got some very adventurous vocal work from Dan, almost like a whispery but aggressive tone on this song, and really fits the mood of the song structure. His vocals on this track kind of remind me of the song Omen from his solo project, White Moth Black Butterfly. And if you guys have not checked that out, that's really cool if you're into electronica or more vocal-based music, almost like an R&B style on some of those songs. So yeah, definitely go check that out if you have not heard it. Really good stuff. They're actually coming out with some new stuff soon as well. There's a really nice interlude around 4 minutes into the song. There's some piano going on here, and that's another thing that I've noticed that they've added into this album a lot, is there's some really good piano interludes. Not many, but I believe there's one on this track, and then there's one on the last track, actually, 7 Names, and I'll talk about that later, but I do like the addition of piano on some of these interludes. Kind of adds some flavor to the album that is not on any of their previous records. After that interlude, it kicks right back into the main riff, and Dan does these almost chanty-like vocals where it's like, no one wanna be the same, there's nowhere left to hide. It's pretty cool. It's really catchy. Really fun to sing along to him. He's almost channeling Michael Jackson on this one, and he does this a few times on this album. That's kind of the best way to describe some of his recent vocal stylings. And that's a highlight of this album. Dan has come back full force. He sounds absolutely amazing on this record. Since he was on their first album, One, he's vastly improved, and he has tons more range and lots more versatility. He uses tons of different vocal stylings throughout this record, and that's one thing that keeps it really exciting. In my opinion, Tesseract are known for doing one thing really well, and it's their ambient to, like you're saying, gent-like. It's hard to describe, but their polyrhythmic song structures, and they like to space those out with ambient moments. I feel like that's one thing they're consistently good at, but it's also one thing that they don't stray from very often. They like to stick to one formula, it seems, and it's not a bad thing. In my personal opinion, they fill a gap in the music world that's kind of hard to fill up with anyone else. I feel like Tesseract have a very unique shoe print almost on the metal world. They combine very calm and very intense moments simultaneously in a way that no other band necessarily can, in my opinion. And that's the reason why I'm kind of okay with them sticking with their style at this point. Just remember, this is my opinion, so if you guys have your own, obviously that's just as respectable as my opinion. Not gonna bash you, don't bash me, bro. We're all friends here. And Utopia ends off very abruptly, just a nice big hit at the end. The lyrical content of Utopia is bleeding 1984 to me. I feel like it's highly inspired by George Orwell's novel, and that's not a bad thing at all. Obviously, the track title makes a whole lot of sense as compared to the lyrical content. So, yeah, that's the first track. And right after that, little ambient section transitions right into Hexes, which is becoming one of my favorite songs on the record. It actually was one of my least favorite initially when I first started listening to it. It's one of those grower tracks for me, at least. Some people seem to have liked it right off the bat. For me, I had to hear it a few times to fully grasp it and get into it, but it's really good. Starts off nice and ambient with some more clean vocals. Just note that this record does have plenty of clean vocals and very little of his scream type vocals. When Dan's vocals do finally appear on this track, there's some actually really cool harmonizing vocals in the background. They're very faded and cut out. You kind of have to listen really closely to get them, but I actually just discovered those recently. It sounds like he's off in the distance screaming back from the past, because that's one thing that I think the song is trying to portray lyrically is voices from the past. I feel like the faded vocals in the beginning of this track follow along with the lyrical theme of the song, which is reflected in a few of the vocal lines, like "History hexes us" and "It isn't a secret, this my child is a mystery." Kind of reflects the fact that they're talking about the fact that the past influences your thought process and what you think about the present and the future. So that's what I feel like the main point of this song is lyrically, and the instrumental does match along with those lyrics really well. That's what made the song connect for me. There's some really catchy harmonizing vocals in the chorus by Martin Gresh. I looked him up, and he's actually not as obscure as I thought he was. I thought that he was from a band called Polaris, and I was totally wrong. Polaris is an Australian metalcore band that one of the YouTube channels I follow, Ryan Siu, he's the guitarist for Polaris, and that was not the band he was from. Martin Gresh is actually has a couple of credits on some of Jeff Buckley's records, and he also mostly does solo stuff. So it's unique to kind of hear him on the TesseracT record. It's something completely unique and out there. It's a guest I had no clue would even appear on a record like this. So I always thought that was pretty cool. And the harmonizing vocals obviously work really well with Dan. I feel like Dan has a very compatible voice. I feel like lots of different vocalists can kind of mesh with what he's doing, and he won't drown anyone out, or he doesn't really make anyone sound crappy, which is cool. I feel like I'm kind of praising him a little too much here. And after Hexes, there's another ambient transition, and that goes into Survival, the second single that they released on the record. Survival has the most standard song structure among all the songs on this record, in my opinion. It just starts right off with the chorus, almost, and kicks right into a verse, chorus, verse, that whole deal. Follows that trend the entire way through the song. And I believe it's only a little under 4 minutes in length, so it's perfect in my opinion. I feel like it would fit on the radio really well if they were to put anything from TesseracT on the radio. This would probably be one of their best picks. Plus the fact that the song is in the key of B flat minor, which is one of my favorite musical keys for some reason. I don't know why. I feel like when I started listening to In Flames, some of their later records, is when I started getting into that key specifically, but so far, it hasn't let go of me yet. Songs that are usually in that key end up being some of my favorites, so I would definitely blame their musical choices for that. It's all your fault, TesseracT. You made me like your single. Dan said in one of his vocal tutorial videos that this song is about how hard it is being on the road or away from your family while you're on tour, and just living in a band in general, and dealing with all the different things that you go through in life as a band member. And yeah, I think that reflects pretty well in the lyrics as well. It's not initially what I thought the song was about, but it translates now that I think about it a little more, and yeah, makes a good point. This song, I think, has the least amount of ambience, and that may be a reason why it's not my favorite anymore. TesseracT's ambient sections are some of my favorite parts of their music. So if a song doesn't have as much of that, it might just be something that I don't prefer as much. If you're trying to get someone into metal, or they're a new fan of any of the progressive metal bands, I feel like this would be a great introductory track to get them into it. So I would say give this one a shot if someone's new to the metal genre. I think it would be a really good fit for them. Though a highlight at the end is the groovy riff at the end, because of course TesseracT knows how to do that really well, and I feel like they implement it perfectly at the end of this song. This song ends abruptly as well and goes straight into Tourniquet, which is, in my opinion, the ballady track on this album. It's nice and slow, it's ambient pretty much all the way throughout the song until it kicks in for the last few bits. If you can't tell by now, I'm a sucker for ambience in music. I'm a big fan of IDM, intelligent dance music, and lots of ambient electronica music, so anything that kind of caters to that is something I really enjoy. And this song's full of that. It's their most ambient track, in my opinion, to date. It is 75% soft, which is different for them. It's a really nice break from some of the rest of the songs on the record, so I do like the fact that it's placed near the middle of the album to kind of break things up, and so you can chill for a little bit, man, and enjoy life. I feel like this song shows off a lot of 4D Studios production as well. You can really tell that they put a lot of time and effort into the production with this song because of the sheer amount of layers you can hear if you're wearing headphones while listening to it. If you do want to hear this album the best way you can, please wear headphones. It sounds fantastic with any kind of in-ears that have noise canceling. Just a real spectacle, in my opinion. Currently, I would say this is my favorite track off the record, just because of the sheer amazing production value. Dan's vocals are fantastic. The guitar riff is both simple and complex in its structure. What I mean by simplicity and complexity is that the guitar pattern is actually very simple, but it's set to an odd-timed drum rhythm, which ends up offsetting the pattern quite a bit and keeps it interesting, which is cool. Around 3 minutes in this track, you get to hear some of Dan's falsetto work. There is not a lot up until this point. He starts using it a little bit more later on in the record, but this is the first time you kind of get to hear his higher falsetto vocals in this band, and kind of proves the fact that Dan really can compete with Ash in his vocal repertoire. His falsetto at this point reminds me actually of Sigur Rós more than anybody else. Another band that you can check out. Got a whole list of bands for you that y'all can look at, you know. Right after that, the band kicks in full force. It's emotional, it's intense, it's a really good build-up crescendo for the song. After his falsetto passage, the band builds up and kind of hits a crescendo. It's a very emotional moment on the record. It's very good. The main theme comes back, except this time the band's playing with 110%. which makes it sound really cool. Kind of gives you a contrast as the fact that the band can take a phrase that sounds good both soft and loud, which is something that takes talent to write song-wise. The band comes right back into their groovy self not long after that, and this is one of the highlights on the track for me, is the nice slidey bass riff going on in the background. Lots of fun to bounce your head to. This is followed immediately by one of the bounciest bass riffs they've ever written, and it's a whole lot of fun. Hope y'all enjoy it. The drums kick into double time towards the end of the song to kind of complement the riff and give it a different feel. It reminds me a lot of Retrospect off of their last album, where the drums do go from double time to half time, but this time it does the reverse, which kind of gives you almost like a flashback, but it's not. Keeps the song unique, but also reminds you that, hey, they've done this before, kinda. Tourniquet fades out and the track Utopia begins. Has a really brooding and dark almost tone to it. So I can almost feel like this could be a Dystopia Part 2 just because of the key it's in or what kind of tone it's creating, but I can also see why they named it that too. This is one of the rare instances where I feel like the name doesn't necessarily fit the song, but that's just how I feel about it. I don't know whether anyone else feels differently. Utopia actually reminds me a lot of Nascent in the way that it has an almost creepy undertone to it, but at the same time it's got obviously their sense of melody involved, so there's lots of really cool key changes in this one as well. Another signature bass groove not long after the brooding intro, and then Dan's vocals come in once again, and you can kind of almost hear his British accent throughout this song, which is a nice touch. I feel like a lot of British artists don't let their accents shine through, and I always thought that was kind of a unique thing. There's some really cool, quick moments of vocal delivery from Dan on this track, because there are quite a few bass grooves going on, just lots of groove patterns. I feel like this song feels more like a collection of riffs than the rest of the album. It's not necessarily a bad thing. There are bands that use riff collections a whole bunch. Revocation, in my opinion, is a prime example. There are a lot of bands that write with riffs, simply. They just find out which riffs fit together the most, and then they craft songs that way. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, and another way to show that TesseracT is trying something different. I always thought that was a nice touch. Dan's vocal delivery on this track reminds me of Michael Jackson once again. This is another one of the songs where the ambience does kind of take a back seat, and mostly full of different grooves, which is not a bad thing if you're into that part of them. I like the fact that they blended that in. So if you're looking for a more groove-oriented track, Utopia is a good pick on this record. Right before the 5-minute mark hits, you hear rapping for some reason. This is totally new for TesseracT. And this is Dan, obviously, rapping this part. It's not like the bassist comes in. It's just like, yeah, I know how to rap now. Rapping section does fit the groove very well. It's something I actually fell in love with right away. I've heard people say other things, like they didn't like it or it took them a while to get used to it. I honestly love it. I actually think it's a great addition, and if they use it more power to them. I actually think it's a pretty cool way to finish the song off too, as that little almost spike of uniqueness that keeps the song engaging. It's still not my favorite track, but that's one of its highlights, and also one of the highlights of the record for me. After Utopia is Phoenix. This seems to be the least favorite of a lot of people's just because the track is so short. I feel like it's only around 3 minutes. Another one of those songs where the recurring main theme starts the track right off. It just kicks right into the chorus, essentially. The chorus does have a really cool minor major key interplay going on, so I do like that. I like the key change in the chorus. Right after the main theme, the song changes gears, goes right into an ambient section. It took me off guard the first time I heard it. This ambient section is another place where Dan's falsetto voice shines. I'm telling you, he holds that note really long. It's scary. Sometimes I just don't like it when there's songs that I can't sing along to because they're so difficult. This is one of those cases because he holds some of those falsetto notes extremely long. This isn't necessarily my fault, but for some reason his falsetto section in this song reminds me of Elmo. Doesn't really make me enjoy the song any less. It actually kind of helps me enjoy it more, but at the same time, I'll get a good kick out of that every once in a while. I don't know whether anyone else thinks the same thing, but for some reason, it just makes me think of Elmo whenever he's going around in his house going, I don't know. I can't do a high voice anymore unless I use falsetto. That's not my deal. But I just always thought that was, for some reason, that's what I think of when I hear that section. So take that as you will. After that gets real quiet, does a nice little build up and kicks back into the chorus riff, and that's pretty much the end of the song. I feel like because of how short this song is, I would almost call it a transition track. Like, it's almost like one big interlude, but it's not, because it does have a theme. It's got a chorus verse structure. It's just really short. It's something that TesseracT hasn't really ever done. Most of their songs are pretty long, pretty progressive, and some of them have a lot of different changes. This is a very simplistic song for them. Wouldn't say it's a bad thing. I really love that ambient section. That's probably the reason why I keep that track pretty darn close by. It's just another fun track to listen to. Kind of almost has that survival feel where it does have a pretty standard song structure. I can't find anything wrong with it though, so still think it's good. Following Phoenix, we have Messenger, the first single on the record Polaris. The intro riff to Messenger is really catchy, really fun. No doubt in why they picked this as a single. It's a really fun track, really catchy. It got me into it right off the bat. Good pick, in my opinion. Dan's vocals have a slight bit of dissonance, and this just reflects what he said in his vocal tutorial for this song as well. He says Messenger is kind of about the media or society kind of blurring your vision, or blurring what you may certainly think about something, or blur your vision of the world almost. And it definitely reflects in the vocals and the note choices that he gave. He even said that himself, so. This song really brings back the 1984 vibe for me. I don't know why this album has so many references to that, in my opinion, but that just seems to be the piece of literature that I pull out whenever I listen to this album. It kind of gives off that dystopian, almost rebellion to the way society thinks that you should be kind of thing. It's not an emo record. It's just what I think. And I think Messenger brings the progressive edge a little more than Survival does as a single. I would consider Messenger to be the better song. The song works really well as a single, but it also keeps that progressive punch going on. It's a really good blend of both catchiness and complexity. And I feel like I say that a lot with TesseracT's records, but there's no real other way for me to describe it. It doesn't follow a standard song structure whatsoever. It's always throwing something new at you. And that's one thing that I really enjoy about the track. Dan also throws some really almost painful sounding falsettos near the end of this track. And a really nice emotional ending that caught my attention the first time I heard it, and it's still a really good section to hear towards the end of the song. It's a really good ending to the track. Track 8, Cages, starts off really slow with a really cool melodic, clean guitar passage, actually. And I feel like this is something unique, again, that I have not heard TesseracT implement into their records. You know how I said earlier that they do one thing really well? In this case, they bring lots of different elements to the table that they haven't in their previous records, and that's one reason why I appreciate this album so much, as compared to some of their others. Even though it's not a concept album, it's not as cohesive as some of their other records are. They bring some new things to the table while still keeping the TesseracT formula that everyone knows and loves. That's probably the best way I could describe the way this album feels. The clean guitar passages in this song are pretty uncharacteristic of TesseracT. For me, they almost bring off like a Buckethead vibe. If you've heard any of his clean guitar records, they kind of bring off that kind of tonality, just like standard minor kind of stuff. TesseracT has a certain tone when they're going for a clean guitar passage, and this is much more sterile than what they usually implement. There doesn't seem to be a lot of effects going on with this passage, which is something I actually really like. It's something different for them. These nice flowy, clean guitar leads actually go through pretty much the first half of the entire song, which is a really enjoyable thing about it. Dan kind of implements some low harmonies near the beginning of this song as well, which is a nice touch. I feel like you don't get to hear a lot of his lower range in some of these songs since he's kind of belting out a lot of these vocals. There's even more bass and guitar interplay on this song, something that the entire album is full of, and probably something that I've talked about too much, but you just can't get enough of it. It's like you're standing up there on stage with like your fingers going, play more, please. They take that riff, distort it, and play the same thing. One thing TesseracT does really well is use repetitive riff structure to kind of make a song more catchy, make it more engaging, which is probably one reason why I enjoy them so much and why I relate their music more to electronica than I even do to metal music, because of the repetitiveness of it. Something Brian Eno used in the 70s. And at the end of the song, it transitions into this almost jazzy pattern. It reminds me a little bit of Calibre Yow from Altered State, the song with the saxophone solo in it. Kind of shows their jazzy side a little more, which is something I've always appreciated from them. And Dan does implement a couple of screams at the end of this track, which is something that I don't think he does on the rest of the record. And the last track, Seven Names, everyone lauds this track, and I do too. It's a really great closer to the record and has a really passionate crescendo towards the end, and ends with some really nice piano playing as well. There's a really nice key change once the band hits 110% here as well. Kind of almost reminds me of Devin Townsend a little bit with the way he'll change keys. Reminds me a lot of The Death of Music, some other older Devin Townsend songs as well. Just that almost minor to major key change going on in there is a really nice touch. Ends the album extremely well. And you start hearing the piano playing towards the end again. Kind of is a good way to close the album. I think what it does is it builds a mental connection from the last track to the first track, which is probably why I feel like there's good opening and closing tracks, because that's one of the things that they tend to match pretty well. There's some really good backing vocals on this as well, done by Dan, of course. If you listen closely, you can hear some really cool melodies going on in the background as well. Yeah, and the piano playing ends the record, and that's pretty much it. That's Polaris. I know a lot of people say for most bands that their latest record is their best, and I wouldn't necessarily say anything different. I would say that this is their best record to date. And I feel like if I was part of a band, I would feel like my latest offering was usually the best, because it's the stuff that's the freshest. It's the stuff that you've written the most recently. I can admit that I don't enjoy every single song from TesseracT, but I can say that every single record I've listened to all the way through and I've consistently enjoyed. No real difference here. Polaris is a awesome record. If you feel like you want to hear TesseracT but you want almost a shorter album experience and you want a little bit more diversity, I feel like Polaris is a great pick whenever you're feeling like you need something to listen to. The top 3 words I would give this record would be diverse, dynamic, and powerful. That's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this album review. If you want me to review anything else, let me know. I've got plenty more that I can definitely review. I did listen to this record quite a few times before I reviewed it, and I did write notes as I was having my last recent listen to the record. So if you guys do want to check those out, those are in the description box below. If you do want to see what I was writing or what I was almost feeling as I was listening to the record. If you guys want to hear more, let me know. Any other bands you want me to cover, or bands that I may know that you'd like me to check out. If you like this style of video, or if you want to see more, you can subscribe, or you can obviously like the video, or shoot me a comment, let me know. Thank you guys for watching. You guys are awesome. Out for now. Y'all ready for the Fat Boys album reviews? And then obviously they kick it. They kick it, baby. It was me. That was me. It was me. I farted.
Again?
Yeah.
It must be the coffee.
It's a farty night
It's the
tonight.
coffee!
Walls.
It's like speech class, everyone.
Does this have a mic port?
Oh, what?
TesseracT are a British progressive metal supergroup. They're not a supergroup at all. What am I talking about? They sound like a supergroup because that's how good they are. Duh. You should listen. I'm your teacher. Burp content is really engaging and just makes me want to burp more. just had a lot of pizza, guys. The lyrics remind me of almost. Okay, hold on. The lyrics are the also as a very avid.
Use mine occasionally.
Hey y'all, I'm back. I don't care. I love criticism. It's amazing, you know.
That is not going in a video.
From I feel like the faded vocals in the beginning of this track do remind me of the lyrical theme of this song, which is good. That doesn't work. It's not working for me.
You're so cute when you're filming.
And make sure you don't bounce your car when you listen to this part, because it will force you into bouncing so much that you break everything. I don't even know.
What? Awkward.
I just say a bunch of weird
Bounce
crap.
everything? That could mean a lot of things, dude.
And right before I burp. Wow. Charisma.
That's why you have a practice round.
Exactly. Of course, like most jazz bands, there were genty bands out there, but everybody's got to have their thing, you know.
Genty, in quotes.
The gent.